of the rather unexpected but very successful outcomes of this managing environmental change at the Rural Urban Fringe project has been this board game, Rufopoly. The game was initially created for an activity which we went to back in November at another conference called Who Should Run the Countryside, run by the ReLU project, who are the funders for this particular project. It was created as an interactive way of talking to people about decisions that need to be made in the rural urban fringe space. The way the board was created was we used the whole team of researchers who've been involved in the project to write the questions for us. And the board centres around a place called Rufshire, an imaginary county. Therefore, when people answer the questions, they're not worried about I live there or what that might mean in reality or what real policy might apply. They talk about it in a safe space and have perhaps an opportunity to be more creative and more innovative with their responses. We've used the game at a number of levels now. We've used it with our own undergraduate and postgraduate students, and we've also taken it to a number of events, and it's been played by people such as Natural England, the Welsh Assembly Government and others. It's now starting to attract attention at national level across the UK. We also aspire to do a little bit more with it in terms of, in reality, how can we use it to engage people with the planning process today? How can we get people to use it to relate to reality? I think you've seen an example of some people playing it today, and I hope that you enjoyed what you saw.
First go, I'm afraid you only get to throw one dice.
Okay.
So,
One.
which character?
I'll be a frog.
So, question one, it's happening just here, so it's regarding values and decision making. So, if you'd like to read the question, and this one's a multiple choice one.
We've played the game a number of times now, and it's quite interesting for us looking at the feedback and the answers that are given about the different themes that emerge. Not everybody is the same. We collect very different viewpoints and different themes and ideas, and I would say from what's emerged today, you're quite different from some of the other groups of people that have played this game. So, in terms of the introductory question about where you would place future housing and future development, the strongest viewpoint that came across with over half of respondents was about urban extension. So using brownfield sites perhaps within existing areas and developing just out onto the edge of those, with the idea of a logical spread of development but would also protect greenbelt and greenfield land. Moving on to long-termism as our theme, those of you who landed on those questions, there was no one strong viewpoint. Every single question attracted very different responses, so there was no clear thrust, no clear answer that came through. So some ideas around the importance of green infrastructure and improving natural capital, but not always agreements on how we might well go about and do that. Connections. Although, we would say that playing the game is random, that you throw a dice and you land on whatever square you land on and therefore answer that question, many of you seem to have landed on connections questions today for some reason. So there was ideas around, not seeing things as barriers, about that barriers can be overcome, or trying to encourage creativity and innovation, looking at softer solutions to management rather than the more traditional ones. And very much so that people should have access to the countryside. Yes, there may need to be some element of control in that, but that they should have access. They shouldn't be afraid to use the countryside. Earlier we had a very good presentation about that link between spatial planning and the ecosystem services approach, and some of you landed on questions related to that on Rufopoly. Many of you were of the opinion that we should take more opportunities to do things like Todd Morden have. Just do it, be creative, be innovative, and worry about it later. Again, this idea of a softer approach to management, about, yes, of course, being more sustainable, and considering the role of organisations perhaps outside of the normal. So what about the local wildlife trust? What role might they play in that? Yes, there was of course the idea that traditional planning and the systems and tools that we have through that are of course important, but beyond that, what else can we do? Values. Sustainable intensification of land. People weren't afraid to suggest things like having an orchard or even polytunnels, with the criteria that, well, at least they're reversible. Also about taking responsibility, whether it's for things like fly tipping or for things like, what can you do in your local area? Ideas around increasing biodiversity, not being afraid to encourage tourism, and also linking up areas through cycling and other networks. That enjoyment shouldn't be restricted. People should feel they're able to use the countryside and not banned from using the greenbelt, that they are allowed to go there and use it in a sensible way. There was also discussion around designing and development in a sensible way. Perhaps we should have pushed you further on what you meant by in a sensible way. And finally, the last question to allow you to exit the game was, what would your vision be for the county of Rufshire? Well, there were lots of ideas, but one person suggested working with residents. Today, in particular, the idea around stakeholder management engagement partnership hasn't come through particularly strongly, but one person put forward an idea about working with residents, of course within standard planning tools, but also beyond that, about being creative, not being afraid of being innovative, and even activism as well. Ideas around mitigation and adaptation to deal with conflict, sensitive development of rural areas, the importance of developing and maintaining local green spaces, and controlled development, sensible development, sustainable design. Again, perhaps we should have forced you to clarify what you meant by those key words.